Greetings friends, welcome to my channel. I am Alexander Musienko. Today is April 29th, Tuesday, and at this time, a traditional briefing for you on the events that I consider relevant, important, and worthy of your esteemed attention. So, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, responded to Putin's initiative about establishing a ceasefire starting from the beginning of the day on May 8th. The Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the President of Ukraine, commented on this as follows. Now, once again, there is another attempt at manipulation. For some reason, everyone is supposed to wait until May 8th, and only then cease fire to ensure silence for Putin during the parade. We value human lives, not parades. That is why we believe, the world believes, that there is no reason to wait. May 8th. And the ceasefire should not be for just a few days, only to resume killing again. It must be immediate and complete, an unconditional ceasefire for at least 30 days to ensure and reliably provide a foundation for real diplomacy. Well, an absolutely clear, understandable, and correct response from Volodymyr Zelensky to all these initiatives that are coming from the Kremlin, I can tell you. To add to what I said in my video yesterday, why Putin decided to implement this ceasefire regime. Because in principle, after conducting the appropriate analysis, we can currently say the following about the true reasons of the Russian dictator. So, if we look then, the first thing to say is that this could be a demonstration of Russia's so-called peacekeeping efforts aimed at least at a ceasefire. This is necessary to create the illusion of being involved in the negotiation process. And in addition, Putin seeks to dictate the agenda. He wants to show that the initiatives of the US, the West, and Ukraine for a ceasefire supposedly make no sense. For him, he wants to nullify this and say, look, no, none of this matters. In fact, the only peacemaker, in quotes, of course, is me. And all the rest of them are just that. It doesn't matter at all today. So, for this reason, he actually needs this initiative about a ceasefire and to effectively put forward his demands unilaterally. We see that Putin continues and Russia keeps putting forward conditions for the continuation of the negotiation process for the so-called diplomatic track. They do not stop doing this, and the decision, in fact, about the ceasefire is consciously made solely by Putin in order to avoid signing any agreements or arrangements. I understand we all view this skeptically. I understand and have explained the experience we have, unfortunately, negative when repeatedly, starting from 2014, from the moment this Russian invasion of the Russian-Ukrainian war began, Russia repeatedly violated its own agreements and its own ceasefire obligations, all of this I understood. Well, actually, he seeks to do this without any agreements for the purpose to be able to effectively avoid any monitoring, any established order, when control, monitoring, and so on will be effectively ensured. This is not needed by Putin, of course, which is why he declares it. And, of course, there is the fear that they might strike directly during the parade. By the way, about striking, it's very interesting. Do you remember that just a few days ago, last week, there was information about the elimination of the deputy head of the main operational directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. So what is the operational management in the General Staff? The operational management is responsible for the strategic and operational planning and execution of operations. These operations have strategic operational boosting or strategic significance. That is, for the largest operations, starting, in fact, from operations such as planning an aggressive full-scale invasion of Ukraine to actions related to the army's activities at least from the level of 2 divisions. That is, in fact, this is already, quite serious. And so, this general, Moskalik, who was actually blown up in a Volkswagen Golf near his home, where he lived in Moscow, as noted by the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, the head of the Foreign Intelligence Service, reported on the elimination of individuals from the higher command staff of the Russian armed forces. This is stated by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, President Zelensky. Well, therefore, it can be assumed that this Russian general was eliminated, including through a successful operation by the Foreign Intelligence Service, a structure about which we have heard little before and still hear little now. It is less public, but we can see that evidently there are results. The work is quite good. Well, in the end, we need to understand that the enemies, and it's very good that the president of Ukraine speaks clearly without holding back. We have nothing to hold back. Let the enemy fear us. We have nothing to hold back and nothing to lose. The question of the existence and survival of the Ukrainian nation is at stake, and therefore our methods of struggle are righteous. We want to survive. If Russia desires this to stop and does not want the war to spread to its territory, they simply need to stop the aggression, withdraw their troops, and cease the terrorist strikes on the territory of Ukraine. Then perhaps something will stop. And that's not a fact, because the amount of misery the enemy has caused, the amount of misery their officers, sergeants, enlisted men, warrant officers, and generals have caused will not be forgotten, and such retribution will follow us. When asked about the Ukrainian Mossad, there's no need to ask if it will be created. One should look at the situation, look at the car bombings, and so on. It is already evidently there, and let's wish it success, because this is very important. Meanwhile, on other topics, the White House also commented on the ceasefire, and there, Levitt Maed, the White House spokesperson, noted about what? About the fact that Trump is increasingly disappointed in the leaders of both countries. He wants to achieve a permanent ceasefire. A permanent ceasefire. We note these constructions. Doesn't Ukraine want to achieve this? The US president should only be disappointed in Putin, not Zelensky, but in Putin, who in fact, perhaps somewhat changed or betrayed the US president's perception of him. After all, we see that the president of the United States constantly says that he thinks Putin will listen, that Putin can be persuaded by messages in social media and beyond, and that he definitely will come to his senses, so to speak, and will, let's say, take certain steps. No, pressure needs to be applied on Putin. Therefore, if President Trump needs to be disappointed in anyone, it is in Putin, the Russian dictator, who is doing everything to prevent an effective, permanent, and comprehensive ceasefire from happening. And further, what Levitt says, as far as I understand, Putin proposed a temporary ceasefire this morning, referring to President Trump. He made it clear that he wants a permanent ceasefire, primarily to stop the killing, to end the bloodshed. And although he remains optimistic about reaching an agreement, he is also realistic. This is stated by Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary. Optimistic, yet already realistic, because it can be stated that in the 100 days of his presidency, he has not succeeded. President Trump of the United States has not managed to stop the Russian-Ukrainian war, to lead to a division, to an agreement. Well, although it started with 24 hours and then continued further, there were different timelines. Remember, they were mentioned by the U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine, General Keith Kellogg, and not only him, about the possibility of this happening. And 60 days and 90 days, then accordingly, there was a reference to 100 days, a sort of symbolic date, when the first assessments of the tenure are made. And now, for the next 100 days, the Reuters agency has already published, let's say, certain outlines and a certain plan of Trump's for the next 100 days. And in this plan for the next 100 days, it specifically outlines the issue and movement towards achieving peace in the Russian-Ukrainian war. Well, let's see how this will unfold, because, for example, in the meantime, there is a position that can directly influence Donald Trump because there is the position of two senators. Literally within a span of 1 or 2 days, well, what is this position and what does it concern? For example, you all probably heard, or many of you heard yesterday's statement, a statement, for example, from John Kennedy, who is a senator from the Republican Party, emphasizing the party of Donald Trump, who on Fox News, again, a predominantly Republican channel. What did John Kennedy say? I don't think it will get better until we make it clear to Putin that we are ready to turn him and his country into fish food. He clarified that this is not about nuclear war, but about tough economic sanctions against Russia. And he stated, Kennedy claims that Putin is deceiving Trump with impunity. Furthermore, as Kennedy also stated, the Russian dictator, Putin, violated these promises he made to the US president and his negotiators. And Trump should have been ready to turn Putin and Russia into fish food. There is such a statement. Let's add to this the statement made the day before by Lindsey Graham, a prominent, experienced Republican senator, close to Donald Trump and with access to Mar-a-Lago, Trump's residence in Florida, meaning a trusted person, who mentioned that there are already 60 co-authors of the bill to strengthen sanctions against Russia, meaning the majority of the upper chamber of Congress, the Senate, are ready to vote for it. This is also a signal. Another signal is this interview. Chuck Grassley is an American senator from the Republican Party representing the state of Iowa, who appeared on one of Donald Trump's currently favorite right-wing conservative media outlets. By the way, he allowed them directly into the White House. This is the Newsmax channel. So on the air of this Newsmax, Republican Chuck Grassley noted that Putin is playing with America, like with some incapable kid, not a world leader. To this, let's add that according to Ipsos Reuters polls, 69% of surveyed Americans indicate that thank you. They believe that the USA is currently not behaving like a world leader. Over 60% of Americans, according to CNN polls, are dissatisfied with foreign policy, including the American administration's attitude towards Russia amidst all the crimes and terrorist acts that Putin continues to commit. And thus, these are, of course, tools of pressure. I hope that there will be more senators and congressmen, especially from the Republicans, Trump's party, who will speak out on media, on leading channels and platforms, and explain what is going wrong with American policy towards Russia. This will carry weight. Inevitably, one way or another, there will need to be a response to this. Because ultimately, it must be understood that the midterm elections to the Senate have not been cancelled. The Republicans will need to fight, they will need votes, and they, of course, will take into account what is happening. They will consider the ratings, they will look at the sociology, they will look at media publications, both American and global, how it is perceived and how it influences the opinions of Americans, and accordingly adjust their policy, essentially. And friends, here, information that North Korea acknowledged the presence of its troops and confirmed that the DPRKs. In the DPRK, it is officially confirmed that North Korean military helped the Russians reclaim territories in the Kursk region. This was a sacred mission for further strengthening of strong friendship. Out of solidarity between Russia and North Korea, the message states, in Pyongyang, a monument will be erected in honor of the North Korean military who participated in the battles in the Kursk region. Well, you see, wasn't this a secret to anyone? Indeed, the fact that North Korean troops are currently fighting, they have acknowledged it. But why did they acknowledge it? Well, imagine North Korea. Why are they doing this? Because it is necessary for Kim Jong-un, the North Korean dictator, to emphasize his own importance and significance. Well, imagine that, unbelievable. It would seem that the second army in the world with such capabilities, a nuclear state, is unable to defeat Ukraine, weak, unable to achieve any strategic and operational significance. They cannot. It's already the fourth year of the full-scale invasion. To capture the Donetsk region, deadline after deadline, they set and miss and lose and lose. Well, they turn to North Korea, to the great son like Kim Jong-un. Well, frankly speaking, I wouldn't be surprised if Kim Jong-un demands a monument to be erected for him in Moscow or Vladivostok. And Putin, of course, will oblige. Where else can he go? Well, there's nowhere else to go. He has to show gratitude for saving Mother Russia. Because Putin has brought Russia to such a state that an economic recession might continue, as Russian economists are saying. Indicators are worsening, including demographics and much more. So, well, the fact that Putin will go down in history, in Russian history, as one of the worst rulers, this is a fact, regardless of what Russian propaganda might say. Well, but who, right? He acknowledges and says, I am cooler, even Putin is my significance. This is why he needed it. He wants to present himself as a great global player, without whom nothing is resolved, and without whom Russia and Putin are unable to achieve their set goals. He is saving Russia. This is why he needs it. At the same time, the US State Department expressed concern. Well, that's the case, we know it. And they expressed concern and stated that military support for Russia from North Korea must stop. The US State Department stated that it is concerned about Pyongyang's direct involvement in the war. And they noted that North Korea's military deployment in Russia and any support provided to North Korea must cease. Well, of course, no one will listen to this, so real actions are needed. More decisive and effective support for Ukraine is needed because the forces of evil are gathering. They are gathering not only against Ukraine, but also against European countries and the USA. Because this is a threat. Kim Jong-un is launching missiles towards Guam, where an American military base is located, towards Japan, where American troops are stationed, and Japan is one of the main allies of the United States of America. It is a touch point in the oceanic region. And what will the United States do about this? That's the question. At the same time, the European Commission also reacted to the involvement of North Koreans. A spokesperson for the European Commission stated that North Korea's involvement in the war against Ukraine indicates that Russia is not interested in peace. And this is a sign of Russia's desperation, which is isolated and weakened due to sanctions. The EU. Russia is not interested in peace. On the contrary, Russia's goal remains to suppress Ukraine, and Russia is desperately seeking any assistance for this illegal aggression. Well, actually, that's also clear. And besides, we need an air defense system, not just one, especially the Patriots. And the president of Ukraine is doing everything possible, making efforts to make this happen. And so, information has appeared from the Greek media, the newspaper Kathimerini, that the United States is pressuring Greece to transfer the Patriot systems to Ukraine, which were previously deployed in Saudi Arabia. So, the work on assistance with the Patriots is also being carried out. Actually, well, it is being carried out to purchase the Patriots, because the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, instructed to obtain consent from the United States regarding the Patriots. For Ukraine, this work will continue as well. So actually, we are moving forward, and in Mecheny, they assured that they will help Ukraine, even if the USA does not. Well, we'll see. It would be desirable, stated the Minister of Defense. Still the Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius and Steinmeier. The federal president of Germany noted that Germany remains and will remain the strongest support for Ukraine in Europe. Well, that's necessary. Meanwhile, in Germany, the names of the new ministers have been announced. meaning there will be a new government. The position of foreign minister will be taken by Johann Wadephul. He advocated for Ukraine to receive Taurus missiles and the right to use German weapons on Russian territory. And he repeatedly called for increasing the volume of aid to Ukraine. Here is his quote from 2023. Ukraine must have the ability to disrupt logistics and supplies from the other side of the border to be able to stop the aggressive war. Germany must effectively help Ukraine. Instead of tying its hands? Well, absolutely. Right. We hope that the German government will be even more involved and engaged in supporting Ukraine and providing us with even more comprehensive and thorough support. And let it be so not only with Germany, but also with other countries. Friends, take care of yourselves and glory to Ukraine.